Hey guys, it's Matt here, and we're just going to be going through the West Vancouver Schools Health and Safety Orientation. This is the yearly orientation of all things health and safety. So there's a number of items we're going to be going through. You can see by this list here, we've got quite a few. Some of these will be familiar to you, and a couple of them towards the end might be new policies for you to be aware of. The first thing to be aware of is that in terms of roles and responsibility between the board and the employees, the board is responsible for conducting an annual review of the OHS program, which is what we're doing right now, and also just ensuring that employees have knowledge of the OHS program. The directors, principals, supervisors, our duties are to provide a healthy, safe work environment, orient any new workers, and provide ongoing training for all the workers, participate in safety meetings, perform inspections, and conduct investigations. Of course, correcting any unsafe acts that we are made aware of, and last but not least, making sure that all of our workers have an understanding of the program. The workers' responsibilities, and we'll just point out that workers here, that's a WorkSafe BC term that is used just for any employee. The number one priority for the employees is that they make sure that they take reasonable care to protect their own health, that they don't put themselves in any sort of danger. And of course, that requires that they learn about the safe work procedures and then correct any hazards they notice. And even more importantly than that is to report them to the correct supervisor or right channels. Participating in inspections when necessary, using any protective equipment that might be required, not engaging in horseplay, and not working under the influence of drugs or alcohol. The legislation is pretty clear on it's a positive obligation, as they call it, which is essentially that if a person observes anything that they think is unsafe or potentially harmful, that they must report it as soon as is reasonably possible to a supervisor or an employer or committee member, so that they can then undertake the steps to fix that. One of the most common accidents that we have in schools, for example, is a slip and fall because of water on the floor. So it's as simple as, you see a puddle, you make sure Tony or Romeo is aware of it, and then they fix it, and so forth. So in terms of reporting safety concerns that may be either long-standing issues or other large issues of that nature, the first thing to do is to speak directly to the principal or vice principal, and in most cases the problem is resolved at that level. If it's not resolved, then you take the concern to the health and safety representative. We'll talk about who sits on that committee a little bit later on. If they're not able to resolve it, then they bring it into the HR manager at the board office. And if somehow it isn't resolved at that point, then it goes to the district health and safety committee. And the committee chair is currently Amy Yu. If there's ever a case where an employee feels that they've been directed to do some work that they find is unsafe, and if there's a reasonable cause to believe that it's unsafe or would cause undue hazard, then they have the right, or in fact the responsibility, to refuse work. The way that goes is, the first step is quite important, is that it's reporting. So you can't just refuse to do work and then not do it. You need to make sure that the manager or principal on site is aware that you are refusing to do the work. And then because of that, the manager will investigate, and if the unsafe condition will either be remedied straight away, or if the manager refuses and saying it's not a reasonable request, the administrator will direct the employee to just go ahead and do the work. If for some reason the employee feels that it's still unsafe and they don't believe that it is reasonable, then they need to contact HR. And at that point, things would likely get involved with the union reps and so on, and it may lead to a grievance situation. But as with those types of things, it's a work now, grieve later type of thing. So the employee would still be expected to perform the work, but that may lead to a grievance down the road. A quick thing here on working alone. Just be aware there might be times when you are working alone, or just really working outside of the normal working hours of the school when things are sort of buzzing. There's lots of people around. So the work alone policies, to be fair, often people think it's about intruders or strangers, and that is, I suppose, a concern. The biggest thing is to just make sure that if ever an emergency were to happen, someone were to slip and fall or have some sort of medical emergency, that they wouldn't be stranded here. And So the working alone policy is really around just keeping workers safe in that regard. So if you're working past 6 p.m. here at Westcott, then you have to sign into the after hours logbook, which is located in the office. And be sure to check in with the operations staff, so the night custodian, and check in with them, let them know you're working late, and then make sure to check in with them at least every 2 hours while you're here. And then, of course, please make sure to sign the logbook on your way out, so that the night custodian isn't combing the premises trying to find you, because they do have to check that book before they lock up the school, make sure they're not stranding anyone here. Okay, emergency procedures. If you ever find an employee, or in fact anyone who is in some sort of crisis, obviously you want to, first thing you want to do is identify the assistance required, whether it's ambulance, police, or fire. Contact 911 directly. Provide the address of the school, 760 Westcott Road, and also be really clear on the location within the school. Because we want our first responders to get there, as quickly as possible. Do not leave anyone, if they appear to be in immediate distress, you don't want to leave them. You want to stay with them and call out to first responders when they arrive, when you hear them entering the building, unless there is a second employee. If there's a second employee, then they can go to the entrance or even out to the road just to wave people in and direct them where to go. But in most cases, if it's just two of you and one of you is in distress, it's the buddy system, and you stick with them. Quick thing here on WHMIS, Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. So essentially, WHMIS is just it's a national communication standard for talking about dangerous chemicals and materials. For most of our employees, this is not going to be a day-to-day occurrence, but of course there are items, for example, cleaning agents that our custodians use, and potentially some of the chemicals in the science room that may fall under this standard. So the WHMIS, it's important that the employer make sure that the employees are educated on the different parts of the WHMIS program and the major hazards and so on, rights and responsibilities of the workers, and the content on what are called MSDS sheets, so that contain all of the information. The MSDS materials, there's a website here that lists all of the sheets, and you can check that out if you have any questions about any of the materials you're using. WHMIS has just been updated for 2015, so there's a new version from the old version way back in 1988. So it's just a globally harmonized system, and there's a new classification for some materials and so on. Again, a lot of these won't affect the day-to-day workings of most of our employees unless you're working with these types of chemicals. We're going to talk a little bit about violence in the workplace. So violence it can be a broad range, a broadly ranging term here. So violence is defined as the attempted or actual exercise by a person other than a worker of any physical force so as to cause injury to a worker, and includes any threatening statement or behavior which gives a worker reasonable cause to believe that he or she is at injury of risk. And I think that last part is just really kind of key. Threatening statement or behavior which gives a worker reasonable cause to believe that he or she is at risk of injury. And of course, so that can take a number of forms. Employees, of course, are then expected not to engage in any sort of improper behavior which might create a problem for other employees. And so that includes things like horseplay or unnecessary running or jumping or practical jokes or those types of things which might cause harm to others. It's very important. Again, there's a duty to inform workers of any information related to the risks of violence from person who have a history of violent behavior. So anyone that a worker might come into contact with on their, or be expected to come in contact with on their day-to-day work, the duty falls on the employer to make sure that the workers are informed if somebody has a history of violence, or if there's a concern about a violent situation, that the workers be informed ahead of time. And the board regularly conducts risk assessments to determine what the level of the risk is, and that's something they can help to guide the employee when dealing with those situations. Now, it's also important to be aware of the bullying and harassment policies. So, bullying and harassment. it's essentially any inappropriate comment or conduct by a person towards a worker that the person knew or ought to have known would be humiliating or intimidating. So if a reasonable person would find it, would expect that to be either humiliating or intimidating, then that can constitute either bullying or harassment. In bold, there we see bullying and harassment are not acceptable and will not be tolerated in this workplace. All workers will be treated in a fair and respectful manner. Okay. What possible sources of bullying and harassment? And this may come from any number of places, and it could come from parents, it could come from students, it could come from supervisors, it could come from coworkers, and it also includes a pretty broad range. Things, whether it's verbal aggression, whether it's vandalization of personal belongings, or stealing of personal belongings, sabotaging of work, or threatening gestures. It does not, however, include things such as just differences of opinion. Disagreeing with people, constructive feedback, and I think the key word there is constructive feedback, or reasonable management actions. So things such as a performance review or discipline, work instruction or supervision, those types of things do not fall under bullying or harassment. The reporting procedures is to report directly to the Director of Human Resources, and you can do so either in writing or verbally. There's also additional information on the complaint form, and additional information can be found on Inside 45 under the Human Resources Department. And investigations, it's important for employees to know that this stuff's taken very seriously, and so investigations are done very promptly and of course confidentially. Again, though, this common theme you'll see here is employees must report if they observe or experience bullying or harassment. So if they're being bullied or harassed, they need to report it. But if they are observing that, then that's also very important that they report it. Okay, we have a quick piece here on bloodborne infections and exposure. It is possible throughout the course of working at a school that workers could be exposed to blood or body fluids, and it is possible that blood could be infected. So whether it's a puncture wound or a scraped knee or a splashing of infected fluids into the eyes, nose, or mouth. Or splashing infected fluids onto non-intact skin. So, for example, if you have a cut or if you have eczema or dermatitis or otherwise sort of damaged skin, you need to be aware that is a possible way for infections to be transmitted. If there is an exposure, or really if there is even a suspected exposure, you need to seek medical attention straight away and report the incident, and make sure to complete any WorkSafe BC forms. And that really is just about, again, protecting the worker, because if there is an incident, you want to make sure the paperwork is done right away so that there's no questions down the road. Just general sort of hygiene. If you have any broken skin that could be exposed to infection, you want to make sure you cover it, wearing waterproof gloves. And if you ever have to deal with any sort of sharp situation, getting some puncture-resistant gloves. So not just those thin blue latex ones, but making sure that it won't poke through and cut you. Getting a cleaning solution, a proper cleaning solution for decontamination and cleanup. And again, our custodial staff can help you find the right solution if there's some body fluids you need to deal with. And then wearing any other appropriate personal protective equipment as necessary. If you are wearing protective clothing, make sure to, when it's removed, make sure you sort of wash any exposed skin that wasn't covered by the protective equipment. Wash your hands thoroughly all the time, and make sure to use running water and non-abrasive soap. And then, of course, know how to contact your first aid, which is through Colleen. So there is more information on all of these things. So if you feel as though you need, you're concerned about any exposure like this, such as the handling or disposing of sharps materials, handling of garbage, or cleaning up bodily fluids, or how to properly remove your disposable gloves, make sure to check that out on the Inside 45 site under Human Resources. First aid is pretty straightforward. All employees have to report if there's any sort of injury or illness and be treated by first aid immediately. So that is either whether it's calling the office if you can't make it, or attending the first aid room straight away. If it's serious in any way, then it's, you don't ask any questions. You just dial 911 directly. The key contacts for our first aid. So you want to make sure that our office staff has any contact information in case of emergency. So make sure that that is up to date. The first aid room, as you know, is right beside the office, and Colleen is the first aid attendant, and she fixes everything. School health and safety committee members, in case you need to report any of these things. The WVMEA members are Colleen and Tony, and the WVTA reps are Lisa and Grace. Okay, throughout the year, we're going to have a number of earthquake and fire procedures. So, as these come up, we'll make sure to review these as a staff, but all of the details can be found in those little handy blue flip books that have just all of the procedures. Earthquake drills, we'll have 3 of them throughout the year, fire drills, 6 of those, 1 lockdown drill, and we will be having a student release drill this year. We're not going to have it until the springtime, but it is coming up. You want to make sure that you're taking any precautions around noise exposure. So, so we're talking specifically about employees that might be exposed to particularly loud noises, not just the grumblings of various students. But you want to make sure that if you are exposed to any of these, any loud noises, that you take proper precautions around hearing equipment. As well, one note here on bomb threats. Also, information for that is found in your little blue flip book, and you're encouraged to review those as well. A reminder for, not so much for you because you're more permanent staff, but TTOCs and visitors need to sign in the office. And so a big help for us is if you see someone, if you're having a visitor come in, first of all, or if you see someone who looks new to the building, just make sure that they're directed straight to the office first thing to sign in, and then to be given a little name card and so on, so we can keep track of all our visitors. And that's really important. Again, it's just really important in case there is an emergency, a fire or whatever in the building. We need to make sure that we have all of our people accounted for. Very important. Okay, last thing here, which is kind of new this year, we need to talk just about asbestos. So if you're not aware, asbestos is it's a naturally occurring mineral. Essentially was at one point very widely used because it's resistant to heat and chemicals and so on. It's incredibly stable, and so it's this incredibly stable chemical, which is great unless it gets disturbed, and then it can cause some problems. So you'll find it in buildings, particularly buildings that are built before the 80s and used in insulation or flooring, sometimes in textiles or gaskets or roofing and so on. So it can be used in a number of places sort of pre-1980. And the big thing about asbestos is if you don't know if it's asbestos, you have to kind of be careful because maybe there is some there. And what happens is asbestos becomes it's perfectly stable as long as it's left alone. But then if it gets disturbed, if it gets broken into pieces or anything like that, it becomes airborne and it can be inhaled. And so asbestos-related disorders can occur if there's either if there's a high concentration of it, which is very unlikely, but it can occur if you get exposed to it for a long period of time. So if there's an exposure and nothing's sort of done about it. And there are a number of related disorders that this can result in. So if you don't know that a building has no asbestos, then don't take a chance. And if you have any sort of reason to believe or have any questions about whether it is or not, just report any damaged material, report that to the custodian directly or the site manager. All right, that's it. You are completed the 2015-2016 Health and Safety Orientation. Congratulations. Please send me an email that lets me know just how much you enjoyed this experience and that you have in fact been through it. All right, take care.